Once the funeral process comes to the close, the soul of the dead now has to move on to the underworld, though no two people can agree with what this underworld is and how to get there. While there are plenty of colorful images of the underworld taken from shamanism, Buddhism, Taoism, and more recently Christianity, but perhaps precisely for that reason, they do not make a coherent picture. What is the role of Grim Reaper in the journey, for example? As I mentioned in the episode about Grim Reapers, they are supposed to guide the souls to the underworld, but they don't seem to be present in every story. Or as I mentioned in the previous episode about funeral, souls are usually supposed to hang around during the funeral and only then take the journey to the underworld, but some stories suggest they already took the journey either right after the death or before their funeral ended. For the journey itself too, some say they pass various gates. Others say more commonly about crossing a river. Yet another recurring description is a field of flowers and plants that is so beautiful that it makes you forget about the world you have just left. One thing for sure is that it implies a lengthy journey. Indeed, some traditional funeral rituals call for burning a set of clothes and shoes and mock paper money so that the soul had something to wear and use during this journey. Today, we are listening to 4 allegedly true stories that give us a peep to this journey to the underworld, thanks to their close contact to death or near-death experience. As always, handpicked, translated, and narrated by your host, Anthony. It's a story from my friend's grandmother. When her last daughter was still a baby, she one day dozed off while breastfeeding her daughter. Suddenly the door flung open and a couple of men in black barged in. She instinctively knew they were the Reapers. They urged her to come away with them. She begged them to let her finish feeding her baby at least and earned a bit of time. But soon they dragged her away despite a plea that she could not leave her baby behind. So they were on their way, passing through several big gates. There are said to be 8 gates on the way to the underworld. When they passed yet another gate, they ran into an old man blocking their way. He bellowed at her. "What are you doing here? It's not your time yet. Go back." She protested that she wouldn't know the way to go back even if she wanted. The old man then gave her a white puppy and told her to follow it. So she followed as the puppy ran. Only then she noticed all the unearthly beautiful trees and flowers that she couldn't afford to notice when she was dragged by the Reapers. While she was distracted with the scenery, the puppy jumped into the river. She was unsure, but decided to follow it in any case and jumped into the water herself. She felt the icy cold water all around her, and when she came around, she found herself laid in the coffin. At the time, most funerals took place in the deceased home, and so she was put in a shroud and in the coffin, which was placed in the coldest room of the house. The family and guests to her funeral were of course panicked when the dead one came back to life. She apparently came back from death one more time. A few years ago, she was seriously ill and hospitalized. At a certain point, all her vital signs were lost, but yet again resurrected. Interestingly, she lost her memory of the full previous day before she died. So, my friend's grandmother is still alive and well. Whenever she visits a fortune teller, they will tell her she has many lives. I had a dream when I was 13. As you may know, most dreams would start abruptly in the middle of a situation. You find yourself in the middle of the world and situation. Unusually, this dream had a long prologue to it. First, I was walking along a road in the void. I soon encountered an old man. I forgot what exactly he told me, but it was basically that he'd been waiting for me. We started the journey together, and as we went, the surroundings started to appear more and more distinctive. It became night, trees and street lamps started to appear, and so on. We reached a humongous gate, and past that was a palatial mansion. The old man handed me a notebook and asked me to let people in if they were wearing in white, but block if they were in black, and note down the names as they were let in. With that instruction, the old man disappeared inside. Soon people started to come to the gate, some in traditional dress, some in modern suit, so I let only those in white in and noted down their names. It took a long time, a real long time, even in the dream. Finally, the stream of people started to dry up, and I was ready to close the gate when one guy in white traditional cloak and hat came up. So I took his name down and let him in. Only then I noticed he was wearing black socks inside his shoes. He turned around to look at me as if he knew that I was looking at him. His cold, creepy stare froze me in the spot. He then carried on walking in. Suddenly I heard a dog barking. It rushed in from somewhere and bit the creepy guy's leg. He shouted and cursed, but eventually ran away. When I woke up from the dream, I was in hospital. A boiling kettle fell on me, which scalded me over my arm and chest. I was apparently unconscious for 2 weeks. So I guess I dreamt that dream while I was knocked out. And the man who deceived me might have been the Grim Reaper. And the dog that chased him away was my dog. I live only with Mom, so we kept the dog. By the time of the dream, he was already very old, and I believe it was thanks to him that I survived my ordeal. When my mom has a dream about an elderly member of the family, the news of his or her passing follows soon after. One day she saw her mother-in-law, my grandma, in the dream. My grandma was an in-law from hell. She hated Mom for being strong-headed and treated her like an eyesore. My mother suffered her so much that she declared to my dad that she'd rather divorce him if he'd ever insist that his mother live with them. Naturally, we hardly ever visited her unless absolutely necessary. In fact, Mom and I didn't even know that Grandma was ill, as my dad kept the news to himself. But my mother had a dream one day. She was walking along the long river bank. On the opposite side of the bank were the late elderly members of her in-laws, dancing. She found my grandma was standing next to her in her best dress, quietly looking at the people over the river. Soon, Grandma stepped into the river, and my mom could just helplessly watch her crossing the water. When she woke up, she told me that we should visit Grandma. Her days seemed numbered, and we should at least say goodbye before she passed. I declined. To me, death wasn't enough to forgive and forget all the emotional baggages over the years. Mom in the end went to see her alone with a few of Grandma's favorite snacks. She sighed and sighed when she came back from the hospital. "That witch of a woman apologized to me," she said, almost to herself, looking out the window. In her hands was a little red pouch which Grandma gave her at Mom's 60th birthday. That she was grateful that I took care of her son. "It seems indeed her days are numbered," said she. Exactly a week after Mom's dream, Grandma passed away. She had been back her home because she was deemed recovered enough to be discharged, only to be found dead the following day. Grandma was 87, and people didn't cry much at the funeral as she had a full life. Only my mother, of all people, cried bitterly that she went away leaving no chance to mend all the entangled karma of the years. A story I heard from an officer during my military service. One day during the early days of his military training, a news arrived that the bus his mother was taking on the way to visit him rolled over and that she died. He was granted an emergency leave and rushed to the hospital totally out of mind. But upon arrival, he found his mom was still alive. Indeed injured and bedridden in the hospital, but she was fine enough to be able to talk. He of course asked what had happened, and his mother recounted what she had experienced. On the way to her son's military base, she dozed off in the bus. When she woke up, she found herself in a strange place. Weather was summery hot, and sun was shining bright with occasional breeze cooling her off. In front of her was a vast field of reed. It was so beautiful she almost forgot herself. Only when she reminded herself that her son should be waiting for her visit, she snapped out and started to look for a way out. The field of reed was seemingly endless, and the sun started to set. After a long wandering, she found a small cottage from afar. It was very shabby, but there was a dim light and smoke billowing out from its chimney. When she reached the house, there was a crooked old lady. Mother asked her the way out, but the old woman barely gave one look at her and totally ignored. Mother didn't give up, but kept asking for help, and suddenly the old woman picked up a broomstick and started beating the mother. "Move away, dumb woman! Damn you!" The mother, now desperate, clung on the old woman's sleeves and begged to tell her the way out, that her son was waiting. In the end, the old woman seemed exhausted. She dropped down on the ground and mumbled, "To that direction. About an hour away is a road. There stops the bus that comes once a day. Catch that, you can go home. But miss that, you are stuck here forever." Mother jumped up and followed the direction. Even after reaching the road, she hung around for about 3 hours waiting for the bus. It was already deep in the night, and not a single light was around. Suddenly a light shone at the end of the road. Believing it to be the bus, she sprinted like mad. The bus driver smiled upon seeing her and said, "You're lucky. I was about to set off." Then he added as she jumped on the bus, "Never look back even if you hear somebody calling after you during the ride. no matter what. Indeed, after the bus started, voices were calling out, begging and swearing that she shouldn't go. Mother covered her ears and closed her eyes, following the driver's advice. Then she suddenly felt the bus running into the bright light, and she woke up to find herself in the hospital. Actually, the doctors had already covered her face with a sheet, having declared her dead, and she screamed back to life from the dead. Maybe it was her love for her son that brought her back from the underworld. Hi, it's Anthony here. Thank you very much for your listening. This is the third part of the 4-part mini-series that we take a look at how the process of death is understood in Korea. In the first part, we took a look at Korean Grim Reapers, then in the second part, funerals, and today we had a peep what the journey to the underworld might be like. In the next final part, we will have a look how the deceased are remembered and served even in their death. So stay tuned, and meanwhile, don't forget to check out the first and the second part of this series. Links in the description. If you enjoy my work, I'd really appreciate your likes and subscriptions and all those goodies. If you have any other opinions and suggestions, please also let me know via comments. They will really help my new channel grow. Until the next then, stay safe and take care.